your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thanks for joining us. Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says if Alberta pulls out of the Canada Pension Plan, it would be disastrous for the rest of the country. On Friday, Freeland hosted a virtual meeting of finance ministers from across Canada to discuss the potential CPP exit and its ramifications for millions. Freeland says she's been hearing concerns from a number of Canadians, including Albertans, and most want to stick with the CPP.
The Calgary Chamber of Commerce has said that altering Alberta's pension system could compromise labour mobility, stability for businesses and consumers, and investor confidence. The Alberta Federation of Labour has said that the proposed move to a provincial pension plan would be, quote, truly scary for anyone contemplating a safe and stable retirement. Protecting the pensions of all Canadians is a priority for our government, and I look forward to an important conversation about this.
Freeland says Albertans need to be fully informed on the benefits of staying in the CPP and the risks of opting out. Meanwhile, Alberta and the federal government are calling on each other to be transparent and accountable. The province's finance minister, Nate Horner, says Ottawa has private data that could affect his government's claim that Alberta is entitled to 53% of the CPP assets if it leaves.
I look forward to them, showing us their work. They've done nothing yet but, high-level responses to with nothing behind them. So we'd like to get their number. We've asked them formally for what the number would look like. I think all provinces would want to understand that, but show the work behind it.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says more studying is being done to see if the province should pull out of the CPP. She also says a referendum would be held to gauge Albertans' interests in going with an Alberta pension plan. And in other news, the provincial government also announced reforms to automobile insurance. Premier Smith says her government will be taking action to ensure that beginning next year, drivers with good driving records will not see their insurance rates increase beyond inflation.
We're trying to make sure that every MP across the entire country understands that they're acting in a way that will create unreliability in our grid, create unaffordability in our grid, and is unconstitutional. So MPs make a decision on this. MPs have the ability to advocate for something that is more reasonable, and we want to make sure that every MP understands our position.
But Alberta's opposition NDP says there are many Albertans who would not benefit from this short-term plan.
After lying to Albertans about a fake freeze earlier this year, the UCP are finally bringing back a cap. But they're not bringing it back for many, many Albertans. The definition that they announced of a good driver is extremely narrow. If you've gotten 2 traffic tickets in the last 3 years, buckle up. Your rates are going to soar. And I heard today that if you're changing companies, none of the measures announced today will apply for you. Many Albertans will not qualify for this cap, and the insurance industry is going to come looking to get their profits from those folks. It's clear that the UCP is continuing to act only in the interests of big insurance at the expense of Alberta drivers.
President of Treasury Board and Minister of Finance Nate Horner responded to that criticism.
I'd say that criticism is always going to be there. It's hard to create a definition. We worked with the rate board to come up with this definition of a good driver. It gives room for every person to become a good driver. The grid is still there to provide protection for those that fall outside of these parameters. But what the insurance companies will also tell you is that there's a lot of pressure built up right now in the system from the year-long pause. So we need to give them places to increase rate in the system, or we will start to see companies leave as well. So that's why this needs to be short-term.
The province has also commissioned an in-depth analysis concerning longer-term reforms. Officials say a draft report is expected by the end of this year, with the final report slated for the first quarter of next year. Up next, the Alberta government officially back in session this past week. We have the throne speech details after this quick break.
There's a couple big pieces of legislation coming. There's going to be a Taxpayer Protection Act, which basically will require Albertans to approve any tax increases. There's going to be an attempt to further Alberta's ability to try and get money from opioid manufacturers to pay for healthcare costs. And the other big piece of legislation we're going to see is something about the Alberta Pension Plan referendum.
Welcome back. Well, this week saw the fall sitting of the legislature in Edmonton. The throne speech was read, which highlighted key areas where the provincial government is focusing. To chat about what was discussed in more detail, our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, joined Hal Roberts from Edmonton.
Tyler, last week the NDP put forth a motion calling on the Trudeau government to give Albertans a break when it comes to the carbon tax on our home heating. A break the Prime Minister recently announced for those in Atlantic Canada who heat their homes with oil. This is one area where it appears as though the UCP and NDP can agree.
A bit of a catch for Alberta that just sort of broke around the same time the throne speech was supposed to happen was that Saskatchewan announced it would no longer be collecting, as of January 1st, the carbon tax on through its sort of crown corporation that supplies power. Of course, Alberta can't actually do that because we have a power market. So one of the ironies here is that Alberta is in a bit of a different position than, for example, Saskatchewan in trying to do this, even though you actually have political agreement between the New Democrats and the UCP on this.
So, Tyler, what were some of the other big talking points from the UCP on Monday?
Well, on the legislative side, there's a couple big pieces of legislation coming. There's going to be a Taxpayer Protection Act, which basically will require Albertans to approve any tax increases. There's going to be an attempt to further Alberta's ability to try and get money from opioid manufacturers to pay for healthcare costs. And the other big piece of legislation we're going to see is something about the Alberta Pension Plan referendum. So that should maybe give us a little bit clearer direction on what that referendum question might be, the timeline that might happen, that sort of thing. What we won't see in this fall session is the Compassionate Intervention Act, which is the legislation that's going to be produced that should compel people to, or allow people to go to a judge to have their loved ones sort of forcibly entered into drug treatment. That will not happen. So that's sort of the legislative side. On the political side, shall we say, certainly fighting back against Ottawa, sticking up for Alberta, potential use of the Sovereignty Act.
Okay, thanks so much, Tyler. That was our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent from the National Post, Tyler Dawson, who joined us from Edmonton.
Many Albertans are finding it tough to pay their bills these days, especially with the high electricity rates. The province says that changes are coming to help make life more affordable. During her throne speech this week, Lieutenant Governor Selma Lakhani says the province will ensure that our electricity market is free from market manipulation. She says it's important Albertans are not left with unaffordable rates under what is termed a regulated rate option.
It is the Alberta government's position that every Albertan must have access to affordable and reliable electricity no matter the weather or time of day, and this government will not permit misguided federal policies to risk the safety and prosperity of Alberta.
The Alberta government is being applauded by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation for strengthening the Taxpayer Protection Act. The Alberta director of the CTF, Chris Sims, says if the province wants to introduce a general sales tax or increase personal taxes, it must hold a referendum first. Sims says this act is one of the strongest laws protecting taxpayers in North America.
So our late former Premier Ralph Klein first introduced the Taxpayer Protection Act here in Alberta back in 1995, and that is why we don't have a PST in Alberta, period. So Alberta is the only province in all of Canada where we don't have to pay the PST on everything from washer dryers to used clothes to vehicles. So taxpayers wind up saving billions of dollars here per year, and that's because in order to impose a PST, they'd have to hold a referendum first. So what Premier Danielle Smith is now doing is expanding that protection, expanding that law, so that if her government ever tries to increase personal or business taxes. They're going to have to hold a referendum from the people.
Alberta Justice Minister Mickey Amory says proposed changes to the Public Health Act will ensure politicians can make decisions in public health emergencies. Health charges were dropped in August against an Edmonton area pastor and church and a central Alberta man who hosted a rodeo in protest of COVID-19 restrictions. This came after a court decision found the government improperly imposed the orders under the Public Health Act. The judge said the orders would have been constitutional had they been properly enacted by Dr. Dina Hinshaw, the Chief Medical Officer of Health at the time, who had left it up to the provincial cabinet to impose them. Well, this weekend sees the end of daylight saving time, meaning the clocks will go back for most of us across the country. But what does it do to our internal clocks? We dive into that next. This is the weekend. Most of the country switches our clocks back 1 hour as we see the end of daylight saving for another year. But is there an impact on our health and well-being from all of this switching back and forth? BCN's Naveen Day chats with a sleep expert, Lana Walsh, who gives us some practical advice to quickly reset our circadian rhythm.
Now, twice a year, we either switch to daylight savings time or we switch back to standard time. And for many people, this seems to affect their sleep patterns. Are there studies that back this up, and do people lose sleep because of the time change?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the research out there talks about, how it affects health. Like there's more heart attacks and strokes and hospitalizations and mental health challenges that happen around the different time changes. But it's exactly the same as traveling. It has the exact same effect as jet lag. So when you think about the time change, just think about when you travel somewhere, when you travel one time zone over, that's what's happening on the weekend. And for a lot of us, we do this to ourselves on the weekend by sleeping in and staying up late, and we adjust our schedules every weekend just by changing our schedule from the week. So the biggest thing to note is that it is disruptive because our circadian rhythm, which is our internal body clock, runs on a 24-hour cycle. So when we artificially change that 24-hour cycle, it takes us a day or two to get it back on track. But there are some things you can do, and I'll share those with you later in this interview to help yourself. But yeah, so it definitely does disrupt you. It's impossible not to, because that circadian rhythm runs on, part of it runs on light and darkness. So when the light changes in the morning when you get up, because it's a different time now, suddenly it's an hour earlier, an hour later, then the sun's not in the right place according to what your eyes are expecting when you wake up in the morning. And that adjusts and affects our circadian rhythm.
How hard of an impact is this having on our bodies when we're just changing the clocks twice a year? Is it a big impact?
What I think is it has more of a psychological impact than a physiological impact. And that's especially when we spring ahead, it's way worse, because when we spring ahead and we lose that hour, all of a sudden the clock says the wrong time, and it feels, it says the wrong thing and it feels wrong, and we're just not quite ready, and we've lost an hour, and psychologically we're like, oh my God, I lost an hour. Right? So psychologically, we get worked up by it.
Now, you promised me that you have some solutions to help us get our bodies back into the right cycle to sleep normally. Care to share?
Yeah. So the first one is, like I shared earlier, change your clock early. Start on Friday night. It's especially important for kids, to get them switching over a couple of days in advance, because you want to be, going to bed maybe a half hour later, getting up a half hour earlier for a couple of days, so that when the shift happens, you're ready to get up on time. And the reason why that is so important is because of our circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm runs on that 24-hour cycle. And when you get up in the morning and sunlight hits your eyes, it is the kickstart to your rhythm. And that rhythm includes like what time melatonin production starts in the evening and getting your body ready to start cooling down to go to sleep at night. So when we don't go to bed on time or we don't get up on time on Sunday morning, then we're not ready to go to bed on Sunday night on time. And then that makes our Monday morning even worse. So doing that shift early is really important. For adults, actually in the fall, it's pretty simple. You could just stay up an hour later on Saturday night and just get up at your regular time Sunday morning. It's pretty easy because we do have that extra hour. So it's a lot easier. Now, the other thing to do is when you get up on Sunday morning, get outside, get some sunshine, or at least sit in an east-facing window, get as much bright light first thing in the morning to get that circadian rhythm kicked into gear, and stick to your normal eating times that you normally do. So if you normally get up at 7 and eat by 9, make sure you're eating by 9 and make sure you have your lunch at your regular time, because that is something you can control that can help get your circadian rhythm back into the rhythm of the new time shift. And that is true for no matter where you travel, to eat on the time that is in that time zone that you would normally eat at home.
Up next, we hear from a retired Canadian Forces colonel about the importance of the poppy. That's next. Welcome back. It's that time of year when we remember the many sacrifices paid by our soldiers to allow us the freedoms that we have today. And it's also a time when we make a gesture towards our vets by wearing a symbolic poppy near our hearts. Joining Hal Roberts to discuss the importance of the poppy and Remembrance Day is Wayne King, a retired Canadian Forces colonel and service officer for the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Lest we forget.
So Wayne, let's talk about the poppy for just a moment. It means so much to so many people, but what does it mean for you as a veteran?
The poppy is now an internationally recognized symbol of our recognition, our acknowledgement of the sacrifice that many of our veterans have made throughout the ages, dating back many, many years before Canada was a nation, in fact. And it represents the sacrifice of so many to preserve and enable us as individual Canadians to enjoy the freedoms and the benefits that we are able to do so. So many in the world right now, whether they're reduced to a status of poverty and in refugee camps or under the gun in some situations like the average citizens in Ukraine, they don't enjoy the kind of freedoms that we have. And I think that those who adhere to the use of the poppy or the recognition of the poppy should, at the very least, whether they wish to support the actual military activities of the nation, if they accept and wear a poppy, then they are at least recognizing the contribution of so many veterans to our society.
So when people buy a poppy, Wayne, to support our veterans, where does the money go?
Well, to begin with, that's a bit of a misnomer. We don't sell poppies. The Legion has never sold a poppy throughout the duration of its existence. The poppies are available for free, really. They're presented to the General Society through poppy boxes distributed throughout the community. So any thought that you buy a poppy is a bit of a misnomer. Certainly, we gratefully receive any contribution, any donation that individual citizens may wish to make to the support of veterans. And those funds are initially placed in trust at the various branches throughout the country, and then used to support veterans where there is financial need, where there is assistance that can be provided that society otherwise doesn't necessarily have available. But we don't sell poppies, but we certainly encourage all citizens to wear the poppy during the Remembrance Day period.
Yeah, and let's make donations to support our veterans and their families.
Yes.
So Wayne,
Yeah.
where and when will the Remembrance Day service be held in Lethbridge, and what can people really expect when they attend?
There are two locations that Remembrance Day ceremonies can be observed. First of all, in the new facilities out at the exhibition grounds. This is the first year that the celebration or the Remembrance Day ceremony will be held in that building. And we would ask any who wish to attend to be in place by 10:40 in the morning. And there we will have a temporary cenotaph set up and bring on some of the representative groups within our community, the youth, of course, and then led by other groups like police, fire, veterans themselves, and other associated groups. The second ceremony will be at the cenotaph adjacent to City Hall. And both ceremonies will be keyed to focus on the armistice declared at 11 a.m. on the 11th of November in 1918. The ceremony at City Hall or the cenotaph will be highlighted by a bit of a fly past by one of our local citizens who has the privilege of owning and flying a World War II trainer aircraft, the Harvard, that was collectively known as the Yellow Peril, and a very challenging aircraft to learn to fly and to master, but it will be present.
Up next, Lethbridge has a new fire chief, and he's only 6 years old. We explain after the break. Welcome back. It's hard to believe November has just started and we're already thinking about Christmas. But Lethbridge County is calling on the community to help fill the shelves of our local food banks this Christmas season. The county launched the Frozen Food Bank fundraiser in support of the Coaldale Food Bank and North County Interfaith Outreach Society in Picture Butte. It's on now until November 30th. Reeve Tori Campbell explains how this initiative works.
So you can make a non-perishable food donation or a monetary donation at our Lethbridge office here at 905 4th Avenue South at the Lethbridge County office. You can go into those two food bank locations and just let them know that you are trying to participate in the Frozen Food Bank initiative. Once you make your donation, you receive a ballot. Your ballot's entered into a draw, and we'll select, I believe, 10 winners is kind of what we're thinking. 10 winners will have the opportunity to dunk me in a dunk tank in the first part of December.
And just as a side note, back in 2020, Reeve Campbell and former councillor Steve Campbell both shaved their heads, raising more than $5,000 in food bank donations during the Christmas season. Good for them. Well, it probably comes as no surprise that limited precipitation in 2023 has led to lower than typical water reserves across southern Alberta. The city of Lethbridge is carefully monitoring and taking proactive steps to ensure a sustained water supply for our region. Doug Kaup, General Manager of Water and Wastewater Services, explains what the steps the city is taking to ensure the taps don't run dry.
There's some physical things we're doing at the water treatment plant has a intake canal that carries the water from the bank of the river into the treatment plant, and we're having that dredged out often after flood events. That channel will silt up, and so we do maintenance post flood usually.
Well, if that's the case, let's hope for lots of moisture this winter then. Elementary students in Lethbridge were invited to participate in a contest where the winner was crowned Fire Chief for a Day by Lethbridge Fire and EMS. The winning student was grade 1 student Ryder Davenport at Mike Mountain Horse Elementary School. As Fire Prevention Officer Neil Jess explains, the award is all part of a fire safety initiative aimed at children.
It's a draw that we do every year for Fire Prevention Week, which runs from October 8th for a week at that time. And we hand out safety packages to all the elementary schools in Lethbridge. And they all fill out papers to put into a draw. And the student for Mike Mountain Horse was the winner this year. So we're here presenting him with an award, and Panago Pizza is lucky enough to join with us and provide a pizza party for the classroom. So it's a really fun event that we do every year, and it just kind of gets us out of the office a little bit.
Were you excited to receive that?
What kind of feelings did that give you to be the fire chief?
Excited.
You felt very excited? Yeah, it's a pretty special day, huh? Yeah. Did you know that we also get to go on a ride in a fire truck in a couple of days? They're going to drive us around in a fire truck around the city. What do you think of that?
Cool.
Pretty cool, hey?
Oh, he is just adorable. The Lethbridge Fire Department has been organizing this annual initiative for more than 15 years. The event runs every year in October and spans for a week. Good for him. Congratulations. Well, there was no home and garden show this year, but a big event is in the works for 2024. Build has partnered with Mabel Consulting for an all-new approach, highlighting all things spring and summer. Visitors can look forward to a lottery and a new leisure section where they can explore the latest trends and insights from industry experts.
Southern Albertans are active people, and so we want to also bring them what they can do in the spring and summer. So it really is about all things spring and summer and putting it together in one place for Southern Albertans.
In any event that we do at Mabel Consulting, there is no reason for us not to be able to contribute ticket money, sponsorship opportunities, 50-50 draws, anything we can do to support a charity that involves ourselves with our show. So Halo came on board, which is absolutely fantastic. And one of the ways we're going to get them to essentially raise additional funds at the show is by launching the Home Garden and Leisure Show Lottery. So that is something we've never had before. And essentially what we're doing is providing a free prize pool for anyone that buys a ticket to this show.
The 2024 Home and Garden Show will run from March 14th till the 16th at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center in Lethbridge. Up next, what does the economic trend look like for the region? Well, we dive into that next. Stay with us.